From the Godrej DEI Lab, welcome to India Included. Here's your host, Parmesh Shahani.
Welcome to episode 2 of India Included. I'm your host, Parmesh Shahani. I head the Godrej DEI Lab. It's a fun experiment to make our Godrej Industries group, as well as India at large, way more inclusive. And we do this through hiring, through product, through storytelling, through everything. And this podcast is actually just one of the many things that we do. Do check out all the other episodes and our work actually on the godrejdilab.com website. I promise you, life badal jayegi aapki. That's my vada to you. 90s person, so vada raha sanam. Okay, bas, this is not Sibaka Geet Mala. Alas, so that's all of my singing that you're going to hear. And now let's get back to the episode. So, you know what? Every time I pass a Tata Harrier or a Tata Safari on the Mumbai roads, I stop grinding my teeth at the traffic and my heart jumps with joy. Because I know that since 2020, every one of these vehicles has been built start to finish from scratch by teams fully staffed by women. Hai na amazing? At the sprawling plant in Pimpri Chinchwad, which for all of us in Vikhroli, Mumbai is like, Upper Vikhroli, of course, all the way up to Pune, it's Upper Vikhroli. Their workforce includes close to 2,000 women, from mechanics to engineers. Many of these women come from the remotest corners of our home state of Maharashtra. What a powerful image of the present and future of manufacturing in India, no? Koi shak that it's from the Tatas. From upholding independent India's progressive values to taking the lead in employee welfare, the Tatas have championed DI much before anyone even coined the term for it. The all-women frontlines of Tata Motors echo their ongoing work in other major companies. For example, at Tata Steel, group leaders have publicly committed to having gender minorities constitute a quarter of their workforce over the next few years. They recently hired close to 100 trans workers on the Tata Steel frontline, whom they are mentoring and skilling for specialized core jobs in mining operations, amongst many other things. Back at Tata Motors, women workers do things like lift windshields weighing 15 kilos while assembling these cars. Now I know it's 2025 and these things should not be such a surprise. Oh wow, 15 kilo windshields. Oh. But the fact that you're probably going wow after listening to this means ki long road ahead. So in this episode, I'll explore how this 150-year-old group is inventing the future for workplace inclusion in India, about how all of these women assembly lines came together, and what they'll be making for us in the years to come. Please meet my dazzling guest today, the silver-haired and silver-tongued Chief Diversity Officer of Tata Motors. She's been a very successful journalist and thought leader. At the Tata Group, she's worked on projects aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And you probably already followed her on LinkedIn and want to know more about her hashtag Ikigai. Well, so do I. Welcome to India Included, Amrita Ganguly. First things first, because Ikigai is so important to you, and I thought it might be good to tell our listener what it means and how you practice it in your current role. And for everyone listening, we've just had a fun fusion Japanese lunch together before recording this podcast, where I got to know that Amrita has spent a lot of time in Japan meditating, amongst other things. And so her fundas about Ikigai are not from an airport book and one internet diagram, but it's the real deal. So Amrita, tell us about what Ikigai is and how you practice it.
Hey, thanks, Parmesh. An absolute pleasure being here. To talk about Ikigai, frankly, it was by chance and not design. I have always felt compelled to do something that I passionately believe in, and somewhere the skills kind of caught up and aligned, so that it helped me, therefore, make career choices that there was a happy overlap of something I'm reasonably good at, something that helps me make a living, and something that's generally good for the society at large. And that overlap beautifully happened, especially in my career post-media, when I went and spent a few years at Tata Steel Foundation. Working in the social sector was deeply enriching, and I felt that it's the closest in terms of personal growth happened at that phase. And of course, now as the Chief Diversity Officer at Tata Motors, I cannot re-emphasize how much this feels like a perfect balance of purpose and perhaps my own volition to do something and make a change. So Ikigai as a concept, I of course discovered later, but right now, a lot of us who are working in the field of DEI and are practitioners, I think a lot of us do this because we are so passionate about it, and there is intrinsic value for the society at large. So somewhere all of us are living our Ikigai, and that's the way I would like us to look at our jobs as well.
So tell me, what does it mean to be Chief Diversity Officer at a Tata Group company? What is a regular day in the office? Do you even have an office, or are you on the shop floor in the plant all the time? What are the teams you work with closely? Give our listeners like a taste of, a day in your life.
Right. So let me start with the fact that I am the CDO by accident. I come from a media and communication background, so I never really saw myself in this role, which is technically an HR role. But coincidentally, in my 2022 odd years of my career, I have always felt compelled to be part of narratives that were about change. So whether in media or at Tata Steel, where I was part of the communication team, it was important for me to create something that impacts change. And, to me, I still remember a time the outside opinion was Tata Steel is a legacy company. It's a traditional company. It's a manufacturing company. Are you sure you want to do this? You have come from 15 years in Bombay. You carry a different mindset. Do you really want to do this? And I'm so happy to say that in the time that followed, the collaboration that happened in Tata Steel and the kind of leadership support that the teams got, we not only made changes at the policy level, they did some fantastic hiring work for different members of the community, started college engagements that were, they were pioneering in their own way. It just goes to say that when there's the right mix of leadership and people to drive that change, it's bound to happen. Yeah. So I don't see my role as Tata Motors Chief Diversity Officer any differently. The idea is to align to the leadership vision. DEI, we all know, doesn't need a business case, but there is a compelling business case. But even beyond that, coming from the house of Tatas, it's a value-driven approach we take. So therefore, a lot of it is way of life and not just a program we run. Yeah. And in terms of a DI office, while we have a small team that's driving and anchoring the conversations around DI, we do work extremely closely with all of our 8 plant locations in several states. So which means frequent travels there, spending time with the teams there, because unless business owns the change that you want to see, whether it's the metrics of hiring, whether it's for gender or it's for persons with disability, or if it is for people from the community, unless business owns that, this change is not going to happen. It's only going to be lip service. So a lot of the work that was done by my predecessor as well, before I joined Tata Motors, had set the ground, Parmesh. So it was easier for me to kind of build on it. As all of us know, there are some fantastic lighthouse stories that have come out of Tata Motors. But I realize that it's an organization that's reluctant to talk about the work they do. But in our past conversation, especially you and I have spoken about this, these conversations are important not just for the brand, but they're very important for us as a nation, for us as a larger community, because the change that we collectively want will come from these examples. And therefore, it's an absolute privilege to talk about the work Tata Motors has done in the recent past and it plans to do going forward, because it's just not a solo narrative. It's a much, much larger narrative that involves all of us, right?
Thank you, Amrita. In fact, as you were talking, and I told you that was around the time when I came to Calcutta and I was with Anubhuti when Wings was launched. And it's incredible, right? Because that energy in that room, the support of senior leaders like Narendran, for example, at Tata Steel. And when a Tata stands up for something, right? And it's the same thing that we have at Godrej. When we stand up for something and when we start talking about something, the nation changes because our companies, our brands are very entwined with, say, the history of, co-creating this incredible country. So I'm just so glad that you're talking so much more now about the work that y'all are doing. But before we get to your Tata work and the recent work, I just want our listeners to understand what goes into making, say, this force of nature that is Amrita. So you said you came from CorpCom, but you were an English literature student, you've been a writer, you've been a journalist. Just tell us a little bit about that from this creative industry to the Tatas. And if it wasn't for, this corporate leap, how do you think your career might have been? And I say this, we started with Ikigai and you found an overlap. But I'm also saying this to so many people listening who might want to have a career in which they're making an impact in so many ways. And if you're not from an MBA program or a business school, how do you get here and make a change? If you can just take people through your career trajectory a little bit before the Tatas.
So my story starts with actually running away from Jamshedpur because the family saw me as an engineer or a doctor because I was reasonably good at my STEM subjects.
It was a Tata family of your parents' work?
Yes, my father did work with Tata Steel,
Okay.
but it kind of was expected one follows in the footsteps.
Yeah.
But at that point of time, it wasn't something I was willing to fall in line with.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the secret, Parmesh. I
Yeah.
refused to fall in line at all
Yeah.
stages of my career.
Yeah.
But yes, I did know I wanted to do my literature, my mass media, and land up in media. So that was pretty much a straight line post my school education. Subsequently, I did spend 15 years in Bombay in different media houses handling content for Times of India, BBC, Disney, several publications. I think all of it came very naturally to me because the title didn't change, but the brands changed. I was editor for a fair amount of publications. But when the opportunity to work with Tata Steel came in 2015 for corporate communication, it kind of reiterated the fact that, hey, I was being called for something that was my forte, and I was not coming as an engineer, which I didn't want to be. So that gave me a chance to again re-enter the corporate space and own it to the extent one could. To be fair, I did feel a runaway in about a few months because there was a massive culture change that one experiences after working in media. But I must give credit to the environment there, especially the leadership, that they were open to listen to external voices. They were open to kind of look at what value could someone with a different kind of experience bring into the stable. And with the fact that I was also homegrown. So I knew the brand, yet I had an external perspective. Eventually, I went on to work for Tata Steel Foundation because I desperately wanted to learn something new. And fundraising was something I did not know anything about, but I thought if I don't push myself, I'm not going to learn something else. When the diversity piece came up, Parmesh, and this is public information, it's not my planned career in terms of my logical growth in my field. But I took this up because I realized, again, on the point of Ikigai, that when your purpose of making a change, and that's something I've organically felt throughout my career, whether it was for being part of POSH committees or, initiating employee resource groups or creating different kinds of activations, organizing things like Dialogue in the Dark or bringing in some amount of conversations around the Pride community. We had Ayushman coming over and talking about the movie he was launching then. You were part of our, engagement with the senior leadership. So we kept doing these things in a pretty free manner. And the pleasant story is that as a bystander, I saw Tata Steel emerge as a leading voice of inclusion from a time when I was told, hey, you come from media, so you might want to lie a little low. This is a traditional organization, but they proved everybody wrong. And they made that change that was tangible, that was recognized by the World Economic Forum. And everybody talks about it today because everyone came together and built that narrative. So if you ask me, how did my academic background and my professional journey add up to this moment in my life right now? I think a lot of it comes from influence. That I will admit I moved from a prescriptive mode of ye karo, wo karo to understanding, okay, if this person disagrees with me, he or she or they have a rationale for it. Can I understand that rationale and subsequently influence them? And that became a massive personal growth curve for me because, frankly, there are times in your career when you look at someone who doesn't understand the narrative of inclusion. Part of your brain said, how stupid are you? But the other part of your brain said that they are compelled by their own conditioning by virtue of which they can't see the other perspective. And therefore, it's my job to nudge that change and make sure they understand why we are trying to do what we are trying to do. And the good news is they often come around. It's just that the way you influence them becomes a criteria. So
and then it's not compliance on their part. Then
absolutely.
It becomes something that they want to do themselves.
Absolutely. And they own it, right?
And they own it.
So at the end of the day, a lot of change that has happened, for example, in Tata Motors, definitely came from a cohort of people saying, we want a chunauti and we want to make a misal out of it.
Yeah.
Just translated, it would mean you take up a challenge and you set an example out of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And that ownership was tremendous.
But this Chunauti and Misal, what you've taken, nothing is more evident than, say, the all women assembly lines that you've created. I don't know if that many companies who have all women assembly lines in automotive plants in India. I think maybe all are the first and still only. It's a stunning achievement. We hear people who are saying we can't find talent. There are people who are judgmental. They talk about all the problems. Meanwhile, there are companies like Tata Motors who've just gone ahead and quietly done it. So take us through what it goes through to build something like this.
I think the Tata Motors journey started way back in 2014 when the seed of the idea came from the concept that, we often have disruption in technology or, you have disruption in processes, right? Can you do disruption in the field of DEI specifically with gender?
Yeah.
And the Chunauti that the team took on, and there was massive collaboration between the business, the HR team, plus the union. So this is a very, very 360 kind of approach that was taken.
Yeah.
It wasn't a project that just simply had needed project management.
But
it was
who gave
a
the
dream.
Chunauti?
It was internal, and it was strongly driven by our CHRO and the leadership team.
I
So
see.
as Tata Motors has a passenger vehicle business and a commercial vehicle
Correct.
business. So we have a governing body called the EXCOM. A push came from our board as well. Currently, we have 33% women representation on our board.
very good, yeah.
So it was something that was owned by the organization. That was the beauty of the whole project. And while the Harrier Safari line is something I'll deep dive into, we tried this in parallel in other states as well. So we did a Durga line in our commercial vehicle business in Jamshedpur. We also did a rear axle line in our Lucknow plant, which went up to 80%, and Durga line was 100% as well. And these are large trucks and buses, right? And the Omega line, which is our Harrier Safari premium high-end SUV line, it's a wonderful showcase of a pilot that was done in a contained environment. The debate, Parmesh, can always be, you're creating an island that, you really don't have a real-time environment where, the women are working and this is almost hermetic, right? Because it's a controlled environment.
Yeah.
I would debate the other way around. I think it was a successful mission to work on the mind space of the women themselves.
Yeah.
We were told we wouldn't get 200. At any given time, we have between 700 to 2,000 women
Oh my
at
God,
that
can we
plant.
just clap
Yes,
on this
absolutely.
podcast? That's
And
amazing.
anytime I speak about this on any platform, I make it a point to go back and tell the girls, I spoke about you all at this platform and this is the tally that we got
Wow.
for this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that was one part. Then there were the families themselves. Whether it was Jharkhand, whether it was Maharashtra, we took time, but the families came on board very quickly. A, because the Tata name helped.
Yeah.
B, we also took a very, very carefully planned approach in terms of safety. So we have the drop and pick up system. There are CCTVs loaded in the vehicles. There are marshals and women safety personnel that are accompanying these women when they are being dropped by.
Yeah.
So there are some clauses in the Factories Act that one needs to be compliant with.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, you go over and above, right? So for example, in one of our locations, the white collar staff, by rotation, the managers ensure that the last girl is dropped and drops a text to the leadership team.
Very good.
So
Yeah.
these are little things that people do on their own volition.
Yeah.
So back to the Omega line, the idea was to take a holistic approach. So there was the psychological space of the women themselves, their training, their families, and telling them this can be done. The second piece, and I think that is where the backbone of the story is, the entire plant was redesigned to ergonomically suit women. So there were planks added, there was semi-automation added to make sure that the inconvenience of working in a traditionally manufacturing environment would not cause physical exhaustion on the women. So those changes were made because expecting is like asking a fish to fly, right?
Yeah.
So we made that change, and I felt that's the large piece of commitment where the inclusion will happen at a certain cost because it wasn't factored to begin with. And if it wasn't factored to begin with, right now it's not an expense, it's an investment.
Yeah, but
right?
most plants are designed for certain heights or certain body structures, etc.,
Absolutely.
which are they're not
Conducive,
measured, not
yeah.
conducive or measured or
Measured-
designed for women, right?
Right. So that was a huge commitment again. And the third piece was, I think it was a very, very important piece to help with the education and the growth piece.
Yeah.
So we introduced a program called Kaushalya, which ensured it's also known as the Earn and Learn program,
Very
which
nice,
means
yeah.
while you're working, you can pursue and advance your academic development
Yeah.
and appear for your exams. And if you successfully clear those courses, you also can move into a permanent role.
Very
So
nice.
it became a environment of sort where it was, self-sustaining
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
And we managed to create managers out of trainees.
Nice.
And today, when you go back to the shop floor, you'll see there are supervisors, there are quality managers, there are self-directed groups, and all of that comes together in an environment that's self-sustaining.
Yeah.
So that is the beauty of this piece. And something else I love to say, because all of us are snarky about that women don't make good drivers.
Yeah.
I take that very personally. But I do feel that when you see this plant and you realize that the kind of work these women are doing, the Harrier Safari are also two of the highest safety standard rated cars in the country today. So not only do you have a powerful story from these women, you also have no compromise on style and design and safety.
And I don't know if people who are listening realize that if you're driving a Harrier or a Safari, as so many millions of people in this country are, that they're made and assembled by women. So congratulations.
Thank
The way you describe it, it seems so magical and dreamlike, but I'm sure there must have been challenges on the way. I mean, it's a dream, right? Everyone is aligned, management is okay. Did you have any obstacles along the way? Didn't you have any challenges, if you want to take us through some of these?
I think it's very important to talk about the challenges
Yeah.
because it's more realistic.
Yeah.
Organizations such as yourself,
Yeah.
us, we are open to talk about our learnings because we all know it's a joint mission, right?
Yeah.
So our CHRO was very clear that this is something that the business needs to own, enabled by HR.
Yeah.
Second piece is that leadership buy-in is non-negotiable because unless the funds they are there to support the plans,
Yeah.
the project is not going to take off, right? I think the challenges came from a lot of mindset issues from women themselves.
I see.
So the team, the extended team, including people from the business, spent a lot of time in coaching and counseling women who were not used to stepping out of their homes. And you trust the name, sure, there's a brand name that you trust, but you still don't know ki wo karte kya hai, right? At the end of the day, so we ensured that the families could come to the plant and see what they're doing.
Yeah. This is
So a
for
lot of-
trainees, you're
for the
saying, for the
trainees. So a lot of
trainees, yeah.
psychological safety was built over time.
Yeah.
The other piece is that, when you're doing something good, you also look at things like, I almost find them hilarious, but they're sweet in their own way. We suddenly discovered that the women were not meeting the weight criteria or the height criteria. There are some guidelines.
Correct.
So we actually had the policies to be changed and updated so that they could be accommodated because we
Yeah.
couldn't stretch the women now, could we?
Correct.
But of course, then we did the planks and the automation as
Yeah.
well. The other piece was we also worked on the diet piece. We made sure there was, eggs and bananas given to the canteen meal so that they could
In
also,
terms of nutrition, yeah,
nutrition
yeah.
could be enhanced
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they would put on some weight. So the team went along and there were these little challenges that they very proactively handled
Yeah.
as they moved forward. And when a good thing stabilizes and it's almost, a sign of victory, as I say this, though it is a challenge, there's also some poaching now.
Correct.
Because, we have created this pool of self-sufficient, trained women who are now comfortable being leaders.
Yeah.
So there is always a threat of them being poached, right? But I personally see that as a compliment.
Yeah.
I think there's enough for us to do together so that all of us can create more opportunities, more training, more other financial stability. And that impact that we create jointly, it's way larger than for us to have petty conversations on
Yeah.
who left us and who joined somewhere else.
That's also the other thing. The point is to get more women in the workforce.
Absolutely.
Amrita, I want to ask you about how you've influenced senior leaders, how you've specifically been able to influence senior leaders, senior management, people who wield so much power to actually come on this journey with you.
So luckily for us, a lot of the leadership was on board, like pretty much, at the word go. What I realized was that, when the business exigencies come on the first top gear, DEI is a subject that tends to then, go off the radar.
Yeah.
So I think I would like to focus on that aspect of the priority slipping because we had the buy-in to begin with. Honestly, we had incredibly high buy-in from the leadership. But it's that shift in priority
So
that
say COVID might come or something might come.
anything
or whatever. Yeah.
for the automotive sector, it's quarter to quarter that
I
there
see.
is a lot
Yeah.
of exigency that can happen in everyday's work. What benefited us was this entire DI architecture that was be hived into various locations, which I mentioned earlier, where the accountability is also with the localized head. What it does for us as a plan, that plans stay operational through our DI network. So we have SPOCs, we have our business HR representatives, we have localized the wonderful conversation facilitators.
Yeah.
So we have हमारे लोग फैले हुए हैं.
Correct. Yeah,
So
yeah,
we have representation across the value chain, so that the activities that we have committed to at the start of the year organically keep moving.
Yeah.
And we create interactions and engagements for the leaders to come when they can give time. So, for example, if there is a leadership cohort discussion with a cohort of women who are performing well, or they want to visit a certain plant and see its accessibility, the changes that we have
Yeah,
done,
yeah.
then we weave it into their calendar.
I see.
But what it works for us is that the buy-in is implicit. When we do celebrations like, when the Pride Month celebrations happened, we had a prominent intranet banner with all of our ExCom members wearing the pride pin and holding up a card saying, "I'm an ally."
Oh,
Now,
amazing.
it took us
Yeah.
perhaps 3 minutes per person to organize that picture.
Yeah.
But that picture as a message put out a very strong
Of course.
one message, one face of the leadership, because all of them were on the intranet. Anybody who logs in would have seen it.
Yeah.
But what does help us is to cascade the plans down to the units, down to the plants,
Yeah.
so that mechanism doesn't get stalled because of the business leaders' lack of availability, because they are clearly dabbling
Yeah.
with a lot of things,
Yeah,
right?
perfect. Yeah, thank you. How do you track and measure some of these changes in terms of, and do you track numbers? Do you track belonging, in corporate offices or in factories? I mean, what are some of the measures you use in terms of tracking?
Sure. So we do take a very measurable approach, especially for reportage, and we also have an integrated report. So we need to keep it measurable rather than motherhood statements on
Yeah.
how much we believe in DEI.
Yeah, yeah.
So at a CHRO BSc level, we do track elements which are pretty standard, like we track our hiring numbers across levels. So we are
Okay.
tracking them at a cadre level, at a lateral level, and at senior leadership level, because we've identified certain areas we need to focus
Yeah.
on. And we are doing great numbers, for example, on the cadre, where we hire 40% plus women in that cohort. Hiring is one of our KPIs.
Yeah, yeah.
The second piece is attrition. I
Yeah.
think it's important to not only bring in women or any cohort that's underrepresented, and also retain them,
Yeah.
right? So creating that environment with the right kind of manager ownership,
Yeah.
cultural environment, policies and benefits that support those life stages that they bring with them. If you're not up to speed, I would rather say don't hire.
Yeah.
The third piece, and you're absolutely right that this is a more psychological metric. We have an annual engagement culture survey that we do.
Yeah.
And one pillar, which is part of our culture credo as well, is on empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy aligned, there are 3 questions. We have targeted to take a delta spike in that number year on year,
Yeah.
which basically looks at, is the company, does it have a design to create
Yeah.
a empathetic environment, and is it a felt experience?
Yeah.
So those metrics are voted by men and women both.
Yeah.
But we of course get to see the slice and dice
Yeah.
of who is saying what.
Yeah.
And we have taken that as a goal as well, because while it's not immediately tangible that, okay, today I ran this program and tomorrow I'll get a score, it's an aggregate over the few years of experience.
Yeah.
But it's still a safe metric to take, because that cannot be ignored.
Yeah.
So therefore, there are hard numbers in your hiring and attrition, but there are aspirational numbers in our engagement score against empathy, because we seriously want to build that culture as a long-standing, virtue of the brand.
Yeah, and for everyone listening, all of us who work in the DI space work in different ways, but we really, really measure what we do very significantly. Have you put inclusion targets or goals on any of your senior leaders' goal sheets, or is it compulsory in any way? Because this is something that we've done recently at Godrej, and it's actually playing out magnificently.
Right. So our DI goals sit with the CHRO currently,
Okay.
but the goal as they cascade down, work down to the plant level. So what therefore happens is that if across our 8 locations, we have individual plants taking up challenges. For example, just recently we have a commitment of close to 150 persons with disability being onboarded across our plants. But then each of them is a 20% cohort.
I see.
So they add up to a target, but it's
Yeah.
easier for me to operate and govern the journey because they're happening at a plant level, because the plant leadership then has a buy-in there.
Yeah, correct.
Similarly, with women, we have done some fantastic work by when we hire our trainees. There are certain plants that have done 100% trainees, women trainees.
Yeah.
That again is a plant-to-plant choice because the ownership is coming from the plant leadership and the plant HR.
Yeah.
So I realized organizationally there is a lot of push from the senior leadership at an enterprise level, but when it comes to deployment, our plant leadership is something that we heavily rely on
Yeah.
to make these changes happen
Yeah.
at the ground.
You spoke earlier about earning and learning, and I just want to learn a little bit about the career progression. So are there stories that you might have heard of about, young colleagues in some of these frontline roles, which can maybe motivate or inspire people who are listening about how change is possible?
Parmesh, frankly, there are too many.
Yeah.
And that's a good news, right? It's a good
Yeah,
problem
it's
to
amazing,
have.
yeah.
So there are many stories where I've learned. In fact, I met this youngster in Jamshedpur, for example. She was part of the Earn and Learn program. Young girl, she was very enthusiastic. She was doing well at her work. She was doing the Kaushalya program as well. And side by side, her friends nudged her and told, ma'am ko batao. She also runs her own cloud kitchen.
Oh, wow.
And I found that so inspiring in isolation. So I'm just talking about enterprise.
Yeah.
That this young girl
Yeah.
has the enterprise to do her job, to do her education, and to run a cloud kitchen, right?
Yeah.
And these stories are abundant.
Yeah.
We have stories. In fact, if you see the video that the Tata Group team made for us on our Harrier Safari line, there is one piece that gives me goose flesh every time I talk about it, where is this girl from a village who was trained and who's now part of the Harrier Safari line, actually talks about owning the car she has built.
Oh my
and
God.
I still get goose flesh because, okay, this is a premium SUV, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to tell this girl that you can dream, you can aspire, and it's not impossible is a fantastic story of change for us. Tata Motors as a philosophy does a lot of ingrown talent growth.
Yeah.
So which means that a lot of people who have started GT or MTs have grown on to become senior leaders. But specifically on the women front, we do have a few examples where there are colleagues who have been promoted to senior leadership roles who are long timers in the organization.
Yeah.
So that's something the organization proactively does to encourage stickiness with the organization, that there are growth paths. And a couple of tools that we use extensively in Motors is we have something called the IDP, the development program, that's mandatory for everyone. And we make sure from DI that the women have their development plans in place.
Yeah.
Second is the IJP, which internal job postings, which allows for a lot of horizontal movement and inter-function, interstate, inter-plant movement that tremendously helps growth because the opportunities multiply then, right?
Yeah.
We also run leadership programs that are, cohort based. So the Tata Group runs some, we ourselves run some, where a cohort is selected basis their performance, and then there's a fast forward to their growth in terms of what they are doing.
Yeah.
While a large part of it is for the white collar roles, we also have similar programs and learning opportunities for our technicians as well. And the company is heavily investing in learning and development and allowing for a lot of co-pay models where we have opportunities of MTechs and MBAs and other options of learning, where through a co-pay model, while you're working with Tata Motors, you can catch up on your education and therefore grow your career as well. So we have been very aggressive on this as well, and we have seen some fantastic numbers overall, but the percentage of women, and even there are scholarships for girl child and for any kids who have disability in any form, additional scholarships are being given. So we're trying to keep this learning process as a major lever in the growth of our cohorts.
That's absolutely amazing. And you spoke about, obviously, still in the India of today, right? Having a job at Tata's and wanting to grow with it is very, very aspirational. So it's really nice to see how at Motors and at Tata at large, you have all these various pathways. is it Tata Steel and Tata Motors only, or is there a shift at the larger Tata level as I'm seeing? And in a way, the Tatas have been, so instrumental in nation building and creating the India of today. So tell us a little bit about workplace inclusion at this larger level, because I'm seeing an urgency. I'm seeing, as you're saying, a willingness to talk. I'm seeing so much action on the ground. Something has shifted at the larger level too, right?
I feel it was in the DNA itself. I remember since I was in Copcom in Tata Steel, we were privy to some correspondence between Jamshedji Tata with his family, saying that the Jamshedpur he envisioned.
Yeah.
And it spoke about, putting community at the center of enterprise and not just a stakeholder. He actually called it the purpose of existence, that community is the purpose of existence for enterprise.
Yeah.
Now, what that did was when the plant came up way back in early 1900, people from all over the country migrated for this job opportunity, right? This was the first flagship, industrial phase that started in India.
Yeah.
And even because I come from Jamshedpur, we grew up in such a cosmopolitan environment, Parmesh, is because we had the Madrasi Sammilani, we had the Kerala Samajam, we had the Bengali, cohort, and all festivals and all food was something we got equal exposure to because of this nature of the city, right? So I think it is inherent in the brand to be secular. So that's one part of inclusiveness.
Yeah.
On the gender piece, I think some tremendous work has happened. There are anecdotes like the Sudha Murthy story at Tata Motors itself, where she wrote to J.R.D. Tata and said that, does your ad say no women need not apply? And that was corrected. We have a story at Titan where there have been women in the assembly line for the last 25 years. Again, the brand doesn't talk much, but these are realities. Tata Power, Tata Solar recently has set up a plant in the south where there's 80% women representation at the plant itself, and it's doing fantastically well. The TCS, you name it and
Tata
you have stories.
Electronics
Tata Electronics has
Hosur,
done massive work, right?
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is that there is work that's internal. So they are doing some changes internally, but they are also influencing a larger industry-based approach. Or for example, in Bangalore, I was part of a meeting where different organizations like TVS and Bosch and other companies came in to talk about women in manufacturing. Now that's healthy, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about it together and making sure that this is something we can cross-learn and cross-pollinate.
Yeah.
And there are cases when we all know women sometimes need to leave an organization because they are getting married or the husband is based elsewhere. There was actual conversation about looking for jobs cross organization. Now that's a fantastic side, because if I have to retain my employee and I just need to talk to my peers to understand, can I keep this person back if the husband gets a job in the same city? It's a win-win for all. But these conversations are happening, and that's very encouraging.
That's so mature and enlightened also, right? And we don't think of something that we've been trying to do as well. But I'm so glad that you have success of people meeting with potential marketplace rivals, but really saying that this is an ecosystem we need to live in together. So it gives me great hope. I want to ask you about the idea of intersectionality as an employer and how you're thinking of it at Motors and maybe, at a larger group level. Because with us at Godrej, I know even with y'all, it's women, PWD, LGBTQ are primary cohorts. But how do you think of the intersections between these three, their particular needs, and how we as employers can somehow, meet them?
So we work in the similar pillar approach as well, Parmesh, because the degree of understanding, inclusion, and the readiness, of course, we all know it's a curve, right? There are different levels of maturity in terms of understanding, also different levels of readiness. PWD in particular, it took us a lot of education to showcase there were 21 different kinds of disability, but most people understand 3 or 4 major disabilities, right? Where they think of then accessibility and ramps and different kinds of infra requirement. So first it started with education, that can I educate my peers to understand that disability isn't that siloed and it can actually be very diverse. On the count of LGBTQAI+, there has been a lot of openness in the organization, but I do perceive a bit of, sometimes I see people are apprehensive about something they don't understand. And it unfortunately leads to biases or decision making that is detrimental to the individual. I we understand that, and initially I would be perhaps more enforcing of a change in their mindset. But I realized the organization took a much more mature approach, and we have a sensitization program called Wonderful Conversations, where we did not focus only on gender or PWD or on LGBTQI+. We said, let's design a workshop model. It's a 4-hour model that we cascade across the value chain, run by trainers who were trained internally. So we had about 150 trainers, the facilitators, and the entire program design is on unconscious bias and allyship. So we realized that if you don't make these conversations owned by the business and don't put it into the mainstream conversation in a serious manner, so it's an in-person 4-hour intensive experience and not an online course for some good reason. And when this got played out last year, we hit about 1,200 people, and that cascades into everyday behavior. So what I think we are trying to do is, apart from a hiring focus on gender, PWD, and friends from the community, we are also trying to simultaneously create a ripe ground for this to work. Because we've had amazing experiences where people have come out of that session and said, I never understood my privileges. Or they would say something like, we play the privilege walk, the game that just lets you stand in a straight line and you move ahead or backward depending on the questions asked. And suddenly they realized that the women would go back and the men would move forward, and I saw the body language of the men get uncomfortable, and later they would sit quietly and say, I never realized this. And to me, that micron worth of change is what will help us with any hiring that we are doing.
And you do this in offices as well as factories everywhere?
Yes. This is run across the cohorts. The other initiatives that our local teams take beyond the sensitization that we run centrally, we do a lot of psychodrama, we do a lot of Nukkad Natak, so there are all plants have their own approach to working on sensitization as well. So we allow that flexibility. So the piece on hiring is therefore strongly backed by this sensitization. And we also have something called a manager dashboard, which I remember a conversation you and I have had on this carrot and stick approach, where there isn't so much of a stick, but there's recognition for the good job that a manager does. So if you're invested in your team's learning and development, if you're invested in your team's growth, and these metrics are thrown up in the dashboard, and the better your dashboard, the better your performance for that year. So it interconnects tangible actions to growth of the individual, where it's a win-win for the organization, the individual, and also for our DI mission, right?
We use both carrot and stick at Godrej, and that's working. I like both. I feel both need to be used. Again, it's just the sense of urgency, right? In terms of, we have this unique opportunity when a country is growing. How will we create Viksit Bharat without taking everyone along? You had mentioned Jamshedji's, idealistic vision. And, I'm drawn to the Tata diversity statement itself, which starts with this quote from Jamshedji Tata's letter, where he talks about these directions given that, when, as you recently said in Building Jamshedpur, about areas being earmarked for Hindu temples, Mohammedan mosques, and Christian churches as well. So that idealism, in an India of today is really, really commendable. And I'm just seeing about how that idealism has over the years really diffused into so many other things that y'all are doing, including at Tata Motors. So I just want to really, really congratulate you in taking that spirit.
Also, I'm deeply grateful, Parmesh, is that because I grew up in the city and our entire generation that was exposed to this environment, I can tell you that no matter where they have landed up in the globe, they carry a certain hallmark of being from Jamshedpur because the approach, the personality, the thinking is so much more mature than one would expect from a small town, which doesn't even have like airline connectivity, right? So we were very blessed to be where we were.
It's liberal, cosmopolitan, plural, truly inclusive, even before these words
became fashionable.
Became fashionable, Amrita, I want to ask you, there's such a focus on Tata Motors, on DI, in manufacturing, on the shop floor, in leadership. What about in advertising? Are we going to see more women in your ads? So is there a thinking around storytelling and communication through ads in any particular way, either, static ads in terms of hoardings and so on, or, on some of the stuff that you'll do online?
No, absolutely on point, Parmesh. We do recognize that the growing customer base from women, especially in our passenger vehicle business, but also in our commercial vehicle business, it's an untapped market, right?
Yeah.
So you will see a lot of small scale entrepreneurs who may be running their own
Yeah.
fleet of Chota Hattis. You
Yeah.
don't know, right?
Yeah.
So there is an appetite to onboard more female customers. What I would like as an independent opinion would be exactly as what you're saying, that there's more representation in advertising so that it encourages in turn more driving, more participation from the women in the society. With our Harrier ad, I think what got to me individually, they positioned with the hashtag of Be the Warrior. And the warrior spiel in the visual representation had men and women both. So the spirit of the Harrier to be positioned as a warrior, not very inventive wordplay there, but it rhymed.
Yeah.
We did show women driving the car as well. And this was almost to like channelize the inner beast in you. We showed
see.
both genders
I see.
at that point.
Yeah.
For example, our EV showrooms right now
Yeah.
have been positioned for a very, very non-gendered space. We are appealing to a younger audience that's not on the basis of gender, but more on a passion of a greener future.
I see.
So again, that has been consciously made non-gendered for us to appeal to a larger audience on the
Yeah.
basis of the technology itself.
Yeah.
So there is a consciousness to drive that narrative, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. I would like to see more of it coming from our stable of advertising as well.
Yeah, and it's nice that y'all are thinking along this from the design, from the storytelling, and all these other perspectives as well, right? It's so vital. On a similar line, Anita Sharma, who runs, she happens to be a person with disabilities who has her own driving channel on YouTube where she teaches other persons with disabilities, specifically locomotor, on how to modify and drive cars. I mean, there's such demand in the automobile space, right? And while at a larger level, people are thinking of public transportation, urban planning, and so on from an accessibility perspective, it would be very interesting to see what Tata Motors might be doing in this space in individual cars as well, in terms of just addressing all these markets.
Yeah. In fact, at a product and at a process level, I think a lot is sent to change. Hydrogen is coming in a big way. We're
Yeah.
looking at, smarter batteries, more environmentally friendly batteries.
Yeah.
Yes, fossil fuel will be driven out of the system eventually.
Yeah.
So the product itself will see a change. But also in models, Parmesh, we are seeing a strong demand for the subscription model where we don't usually own a car, but we kind of subscribe a car, where then it becomes easier for me to not keep a car as a stagnant asset
Yeah.
when I'm not using it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the sector as we know it is set for change. Like I
Yeah.
said earlier, it's a very exciting time to be in the automotive space for youngsters, because you'll be part of defining the future.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get more exciting than that.
Yeah, and then if you can intervene from, an intersectional inclusion perspective, it's actually quite amazing to see what might come. So I think from what I've heard, y'all are doing some affirmative action as well while thinking of intersectionality. If you can tell me a little bit more.
So our CSR team works very closely with the communities that are, close to us, but also we have reached out to different pockets of the country for our CSR work. What is inherent in the design that is an intersection between DEI and affirmative action is we have women, which of course,
Yeah.
is something that we are consciously working on. There's also the underprivileged lot where we want to have education and employability pushed as a concrete mission. Over and above that, on any kind of, caste-based demarginalized communities that we have, we run extensive programs in not only, mainstreaming them with education and employability, but there's a conscious effort to bring them onto a manufacturing line as well. So what that does for us is that somewhere there is a very, integrated process of taking our CSR activity in part of our DI agenda, but as I've said in public forum is that DI is not CSR, right?
No.
So therefore, DI has its own appetite and its own strategy where it needs to be done for the three pillars I mentioned. But our AA work is also integrated in a manner that it also connects with employment and education.
Yeah.
So the design is something that is similar on both sides, but these two strong pillars work consciously in building the impact that we want to build.
So you work alongside your CSR teams
Right.
in this, which is very unique. I don't know of many other organizations which actually have this kind of synergy. So I think that's quite exciting.
In fact, for example, the Earn and Learn program, the Kaushalya program,
Yeah.
has a high representation of AA as well.
Okay.
When we do cadre hires, again, there's a high representation of AA as well. So these are all, intertwined without consciously being called out as a strategy or a plan.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So tell us about one exciting project you're doing right now at Tata Motors that gives you great joy.
So we run this program called Empower. It's spelled as Empower. EMPOWHER. Empower is something that we positioned as an empowerment program, as the name suggests. It's not a leadership program in the classic sense because we felt that peer-to-peer learning is something inherent to women.
Yeah.
And when I say women, it's not to say it won't work with men, but women especially because they are such a minority number in any organization. There's actually a revelation when we talk to each other that, oh, you face this problem. Okay, I also face this problem. And that sorority feeling helps us translate a lot of our challenges into normalizing them as a rite of passage. So we took the peer aspect. We brought in some specialized agencies to help with this personal goal setting, to get in speakers from our leadership to come and give them the message that we believe in you and you can do well. So we ran the first cohort last year for our L3 and L4 ranks.
Yeah.
But then this year we thought we had a greater pool of people in level below that as well. So this year we have gone ahead and involved our L4 level cohort also. So we run this program in parallel for about 20-30 members in each of the batches. And over this year, it's about 2.5-day program where there is a lot of learning, a lot of self-exploration, a lot of peer learning, expert sessions. And in the course of that activities that we design in that program, we create a friendship pool, a friendship circle. So what happens is that through the year, then this cohort becomes a part of your the work that we are doing. They get known as, oh, this was a cohort that we ran for X number of people. So every year when we create an alumni for that program, they start mentoring the subsequent batches as well.
And they must be together on WhatsApp and things like that.
And what has helped us is that, while we do understand that we don't want women excluded from the leadership programs, the leadership programs don't have a gender, but this was a program that was important for women, especially in a transition phase, that, you have been a very good doer, but you now need to also become a strategist or you need to become a manager. How do you make that transition? And there are tricks of the trade available when you are part of such training, right?
Yeah.
So this particular program, to me, we have calibrated in terms of the feedback we got last year. And therefore, this is a new improved version we are going to launch in December. Very exciting for us because the best of the best spend time together at one location.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a party, but it's a lot of learning, a lot of bonhomie that we see when we organize this.
Yeah, so just the L3 and L4 for you are your most senior ranks?
L3 is when the middle management starts. So below that is middle then. L3 is general manager and above. And we're looking at L4 and L5.
So L1 is your senior. So tell me about what the next few years are like, for both you at Tata Motors. What are you specifically thinking of? And for the group at large, how is it going to be more and more inclusive?
So Tata Motors is on a good run, and we have recently announced a demerger that will bifurcate the commercial vehicle business along with the passenger vehicle business.
I'm hoping as a shareholder it makes me more money.
Inshallah.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Inshallah to that. What I think, if there's a pipe dream that one can talk about, I really feel that, you take up a challenge in the toughest spot.
Yeah.
The commercial vehicle business for me, because as a child, I've always had this thing for large trucks and cars.
Yeah.
I really feel I would like to normalize or the automotive sector and make it non-gendered.
Yeah.
We still see vehicles as a male forte, and I would like us to believe that not just women, but anybody with a certain choice that they exercise as an identity should be able to relate to the automotive sector. That's the direction we should move. Internationally, truckers are conveniently women as well. And there are stories in India that we do hear that there have been chance stories about women driving trucks trucks or buses.
Yeah.
But I would like to see that normalized, especially because one of our businesses, we run electric buses in
Yeah.
certain cities.
Yeah.
And it would be wonderful to see fleets run by women as well.
Yeah.
So these are things that one hopes for. What I think will also make the journey of Tata Motors be truly commendable is because, automotive as a sector is a volatile one in terms of everyday numbers and market share and,
Yeah.
market caps,
Yeah.
things like that. Yet for a manufacturing company or a behemoth to kind of stick its neck out and commit to DEI
Yeah.
is commendable to begin with. It's
Yeah.
not easy
Yeah.
because, as opposed to an office-based role, manufacturing itself comes with its own challenges.
Yeah.
But I do wish that we position ourselves, and we are doing some fabulous work on this already, as a youth-friendly brand. We want to be seen as an agile, exciting, some fantastic work is happening in the both sides of the business. So there's a new Curve launch. There is our electric vehicles are doing fabulously well. The commercial side also is taking up challenges that we haven't done before.
Yeah.
So it's a vibrant and very, very challenging space. And it would be lovely to be seen as something the youth can relate to and want to be a part of, because a lot of action is in the pipeline. And this is something that's incredibly contagious, and it makes it a happy place.
Yeah, and I always find it strange when people talk about these as trade-offs. And, y'all are a prime example, and indeed so many others. People will say focus on DEI at the cost of performance. But what most people don't realize is performance comes when you focus on DEI.
Right.
Your own market cap has gone up 10 times post-COVID. Just as you all have been focusing on having, all women manufacturing lines and so on, right? So I don't know why this narrative still exists in the world out there that it's some kind of trade-off, whereas the truth is it's win-win.
No, but I'll also make it more blunt, Parmesh. I feel that there's a talent war out there.
Yeah.
There's a generation we would like to believe that the Tata Halo or any of the strong brands in the country, that people want to work with us, and there'll
Yeah.
always be a pipeline. But if you're looking at qualified meritocracy-based hires, I have a 20-year-old at home who's highly opinionated, and
Yeah.
it irritates me. But at the same time, it makes me extremely proud because, I am happy they have a voice.
Yeah.
And when they exercise that voice, they are very clear that their certain things are passion driven.
Yeah.
For example, they care about the environment, they care about DEI, and if you as a brand are not aligned, they are going to walk away.
Yeah.
So no matter how much you offer them, this generation seems to be driven far more by values than maybe our generation was. So we were
Yeah.
still looking at roti kapra makan and
Yeah.
some aspiration at
Yeah.
some level, right?
Yeah.
But the talent's going to walk away, and
Yeah.
and then it'll be too late for you to pretend to retrofit your numbers and
Yeah.
say, oh, we have 10% women hires. They'll say, keep your 10%, I'm
Yeah.
not interested.
Yeah.
So if you really want to look at your talent pipeline in the next decade,
Yeah.
maybe even shorter,
Yeah.
you have to invest in the values that generation is looking at.
Yeah, they're also your customers, right?
They're also your
if you're
customers,
having
absolutely.
fleets of all women truck drivers,
Right, right.
they're your buyers, they're your customers, they're your everything.
Yeah. And that's normal, right? You're just reflecting what's normal in society, a 4951, right? So
Yeah.
I'm not asking for a 4951, but you at least get to some
Yeah.
respectable representation,
Number.
right?
Yeah. When you were talking about fleets of trucks driven by women, I was reminded of this wonderful film of about maybe 20 years ago, I think 23 or 4 years ago, called Manju Ben Truck Driver, directed by Sharna Dastoor, which was this incredible documentary about this woman truck driver. It's a 1.5 hour long film, again set in India about 2.5 decades ago. And how beautiful and how accepting the road is, and the other male truck drivers on the road are of her, of the family. And it's kind of, so as I'm reminded of that film, many people talk about challenges with some of the things that we're trying to do. But people don't realize that we're also in a country which embraces you, which embraces difference, which often welcomes difference. And a lot of time these obstacles are so much more in our minds than it is in the world out there, right? So we just have to offer it. And I think it can happen in 3 or 4 years instead of 5 to 10 years. Your vision of, fleets of trucks of Tata driven by women. Because I think the country is ready.
That's fabulous. And then also what I feel, taking a cue from what you just said, I do believe in the individual contribution in any change. I come from the managerial point of view that if you have a problem, fix it. If you can't, I'm there.
Yeah.
Which means that you, me, any of us, we have kind of molded the changes as we have grown, right? So for me, it's very, very important that the youth of today, a large part of your leadership, I know your fan following is immense. I would like them to practice the fact that don't wait for change, become the change, right? And that just exponentially makes it move that much faster, right? So yes, here's to, all the good news that we can
And
get.
all
at
our
the
dreams
earliest.
coming true of a truly inclusive India happening. I have two questions. One is, what irritates you in this field? And then I'm going to ask you what gives you hope. But what has irritated you the most in the past few years, either in terms of people's attitudes or excuses that people make for not being inclusive? And then I want you to end, of course, by what gives you hope.
So let me just start with, I'm glad I took to meditation about 10 years back. It has significantly
Lowered your
mellowed my
irritation,
temperament over the years.
Yeah.
What irritates me, yes, I have been in instances where another person's point of view, when they don't see inclusion as something that's organic and necessary, used to really trigger me. And short of boxing those people right there, I have had to kind of keep a straight face and say, hey, how can I deal with this differently? It ticks me off, but I think one of the whole basis of inclusion is to also include the naysayer, right? So if I'm asking you to include the underrepresented, your point of view doesn't sit right with me, but it's my job to also, in the spirit of inclusion, influence you to see the larger picture. What I felt worked beautifully both at Tata Steel and at Tata Motors is the contagious spirit of success. The moment you create a positive story in any part of the business, the chain effect that creates is beautiful. And suddenly you have initially convinced it was not going to happen, who become your biggest allies down the line. So that chain reaction has helped us to a great extent, and change has happened. And that's what gives me hope. I think by virtue of creating pockets of excellence in the value chain, the idea is to not go to a building top and say, oh, we are going to achieve X by Y year. We took a rather grounds up approach and say, hey, let's every location decides its own appetite. We will enable them, the way it can be done. We have designed a lighthouse model that allows us to at least do a comparable reportage. So we will report on, like I said, hiring, attrition, the programs we are running on sensitization. So it'll be comparable for reportage purposes, but it's also non-competitive. You do what you are comfortable with, because every state has its own nuance. Lucknow is significantly more, conservative than, say, Maharashtra, but we have had a fabulous run with one of our lines being up to 80% representation of women. So the idea is to allow this contagious spirit to influence, and in our own collectiveness inside the organization and with partners such as yourself, create a larger narrative so that we can jointly influence the change that's bound to happen.
Yeah, may the inclusion contagion keep on spreading. No flying cars or anything in Tata's. Everyone is doing driverless. No, but we don't want driverless. We want women drivers.
My closing remarks would be, I don't get triggered by too many things, but this line that women can't drive, it gets to me, because I think I drive reasonably well, but it's not about me.
Everyone, Amrita drives a red Harrier, proudly made by women in Pune.
Very, very proud owner of the Harrier, yes. I just want people to realize that it's a matter of exposure, right? We have told men they can't parent. We have told women they can't drive, just as a manner of speaking. The longer we keep telling them they can't, their apprehensions about that particular, reality of their life will continue to gobsmack them. So if you normalize a father being, tender towards a baby, absolutely comfortable, or a woman being comfortable with the car, or, no matter what your identity, what your gender preference, we create an environment where roles are not stereotyped, right? You get to exercise your choice. And with experience, therefore, the driving piece will become normalized. So recently, one of the national car races, the car rallies, was a woman winner. Then it's not news. I would want to normalize it as this happens regularly, right? So the idea is that if you keep reiterating you can't, people start internalizing that. So we need to tell our youngsters, whether they are girls, boys, any gender they belong to, that you can. And then you unlock their potential without any kind of inhibition.
Yeah.
So this women can't drive is a problem we have created for ourselves. And I really wish that the next generation erases that. And that's my personal vendetta.
So not driverless cars for Tata Motors, but cars with women drivers. for
More
Tata.
cars and more drivers means more cars.
Drivers means more women. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amrita, for being here and for sharing stories about your life and your incredible success at Tata Motors, and much, much, much more power to you.
Thank you so much. And I will close with the words that I think every journey that I have had a chance to be a part of, it's always teamwork, and teamwork alone makes the dream work. So the reason to be here to have these conversations is that collectively our chances to make that change is that much higher. So more power to us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to India Included. If you enjoyed this episode, tell us. Please subscribe or follow and leave a rating and review on the podcast app you're listening to. To find out more about us and the work we do, visit GodrejDEILab.com. You can also find us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Godrej DEI Lab. Stay tuned for more.